For centuries, Western civilization has lived inside a quiet agreement that we no longer remember the spirit of making, that philosophically, the world itself is dead matter. Consciousness is perhaps an emergent quality of biology, and value, or quality, is a mere projection that is subjective. Well, my friends, it was a useful fiction, one that gave us industrial machines, iPhones, empires, and mastery. But it left us wandering inside a universe that could be measured almost perfectly and completely void of soul. Even when quantum physics shattered the old clockwork and revealed a reality of uncertainty, entanglement, and becoming, it stopped short of heresy. The equations, oh, they shimmered, but the world remained mute. Well, my friends, this is where the work stops being safe. This is where beauty becomes evidence, feeling becomes data, and the world itself begins to look back at us. We've made our way through the first 3 books of Christopher Alexander's Nature of Order. But for this 4th and final episode, Alexander stops speaking like an architect and begins speaking like a cosmologist in exile. He dares to insist that what we call aliveness is not just a metaphor, not psychology, and certainly not nostalgia, but a real, field-like property of the universe itself. That wholeness behaves almost like a substance, that space carries value, that matter is not indifferent, but quietly biased toward coherence, beauty, and quality. That we are in fact agents of coherence, of beauty, of quality, a part of an emergent whole that is reality. And that the strange wordless feeling we get when something feels right is not just personal sentiment, but a perception about the way things ought to feel, because they are intrinsic to the universe. This is where architecture dissolves into metaphysics, where physics brushes up against animism, and where the act of making a wall, a house, or a city becomes inseparable from the question of what the universe is made of. Not as poetry, not as belief, but as structure. The 4th and final book, The Luminous Ground, has but one goal: to weave the other 3 books into one coherent metaphysics that edges on a unified theory of human purpose. He goes straight to the heart of the matter, the core of his life's work, and he begins by speaking to his own personal experiences making buildings. Alexander says, and again, I'm paraphrasing for the sake of poetry, quote, "When I am part of the making of a building and examine my process, I find that I'm always reaching for the same thing. In some form, I'm searching for the personal nature of existence, revealed in the form of the building. It is the I myself, present with all things. It is that shining something which draws me, in which I feel in the bones of the world emerging from the earth and making our existence luminous." End quote. He does his best, he says, to not start creating something until he feels it first. And what he feels initially, he says, is not God. It's not nature. It's not even feeling. It's something beyond experience, beyond words and ideas. When he reaches for it, he finds that he can partly feel the illumination of existence, a glimpse of that ultimate. It is always the same thing at root. Yet, of course, it takes an infinite variety of different forms. Beyond words, beyond ideas. Sound familiar? The glimpse of the ultimate? That Tilopa said to his student Naropa. The Mahamudra is beyond all symbols and words, but for you, my dear Naropa, I will say this. the supreme ultimate. For Alexander, the value or quality of his creation is dependent on the quality that each center he's working with has to this I he's referring to. He says, quote, "Each window, each roof, each room, each ceiling, each doorway, the gardens, the flower bed, the trees, the rambling bramble of the bushes, the wall, the seat, the handle on the door, they are all connected to this I, and they awaken it in us," end quote. The connection to the ineffable quality that is the self is the very essence of dynamic quality that we can never pin down. The built thing must be an extension of us, not our personality, mind you, but our very soul. This, he says, extends to all of creation, the entirety of art and music itself. And it's here that Alexander outs himself once and for all as an animist, as he finds these very qualities of self in nature, in each rock, each dewdrop in the morning, each tadpole swimming against the stream. He says these are things that connect to the soul, a reason to remember ourselves. Quality, aliveness, all these aspects we've been attempting to define are nothing more than a road of feeling that guides us back to ourselves, to our own deep aliveness, our own deep awarenesses. It helps us to remember our own sanctity, our own creativity, how we not only create, but we too are a creation. And this is why Alexander quests for a living world, because he wants to feel the aliveness within and without. He wants to explore the qualities of feeling that come with being in a place that feels alive. That which will awaken the feeling, he says, is, quote, "at once enormous in extent and infinitely intimate and personal," end quote. This reciprocity of aliveness that we feel in nature or in a well-built space is the nature of order. At the heart of Alexander's belief, the matter we interact with in all its forms is soaked with the self, with the I. It is soaked with the soul of aliveness. Yes, my friends, every atom in this universe is alive and has a purpose Alexander has laid before us so eloquently, if only we are able to hear it. Today, we come to the end of our journey in this magnum opus, the life's work of one man whom, like the Creator itself, dares to contend with the vastness of existence, the vision of a master, the luminous ground. Today, on the Infinite Harmony Podcast.
Why you had to hide away for so long? Where did we go wrong? Mr. Blue Sky, please tell us why you had to hide away for so long. Where did we go wrong?
Alexander has done all he could in his written work to show us how to make things truly beautiful. He went through great lengths to demonstrate his ideas about the impact of living processes and sequences on the evolution of living structures. He has talked about the importance of wholeness and centers and has given us detailed pattern language for building. But it's not enough, he says. In order to truly build a living world, our perception, our worldview has to change. Specifically, our cosmology. Alexander's going for the whole kit and caboodle here. A unified philosophy of everything, or something like it. He credits science for making an attempt at building a cosmology that concerns itself with the whole, a confluence of quantum physics, systems theory, complexity theory, environmentalism, etc. He even references Capra's Tao of Physics, which we discussed way back in episode 1. But beneath the surface of modern science and architecture lie a set of hidden premises. They're not the explicit findings of physics or biology, but the half-formed conclusions drawn from them, a mood that has seeped into the culture of our daily lives without us ever realizing it. It's what he calls the tacit assumptions. Not the science itself, mind you, but the underlying assumptions that have given us a picture of a world as empty, meaningless, and resistant to beauty. Tacit, if you're wondering, means something that is understood or implied without being stated.
Did you have to look that up there, Jackie boy?
Yeah, smart ass. As a matter of fact, I did.
To protect liberty, we are told, we treat every value as equally arbitrary, even when hollow or greedy. Attempts to speak of value as real are treated with suspicion. This degrades into the still deeper assumption that matter itself is neutral, inert, blind to value. The universe, on this view, is nothing but stagnant, lifeless material following laws of gravity. Alongside these assumptions about the material world sits a second domain, our experience of self, mind, and feeling, utterly disconnected from matter. The outer world is machinery. The inner world is a subjective, lonely experience. From this split arises a distorted view of art, powerful as a social ritual, but meaningless in the structure of the universe. Architecture absorbs this distortion most clearly in the rift between ornament and function. Decoration becomes something tacked on, divorced from necessity. Function becomes a husk, stripped of resonance. Beneath both lies the poisonous assumption that architecture itself is irrelevant, important only as engineering or as image. The chain of errors ends in its most corrosive form, the debasing of the artist's intuition. That something profound to existence is happening through the process of creating a great work of art. Or another way to say it, the assumption that art is of no consequence to the greater scheme of the universe. And with these assumptions, our deepest instinct, that the world itself harbors meaning, that there's some mystery at work, is dismissed as scientifically useless. Alexander says again and again that these assumptions are not science, but shadows cast by its mechanistic philosophy that has gone far beyond the science itself. It's the greatest critique of the West and the neoliberal movement. These ideas have seeped into our collective imagination, shaping how we build, how we see, how we live. And they've made good architecture, living architecture, nearly impossible. And not only that, but I personally think it seeps into our perception about each other and our social welfare. What I mean by that is if you think these assumptions are overblown or myopic, consider this. How is it that humans can so easily walk past other homeless humans on the street, or go about their day as wars rage across the globe, or continue to drive despite the havoc it is wreaking on the planet? How else could we cope with our exceptional lack of empathy for all the suffering in the world if we weren't, in fact, enslaved to these mechanistic views of society? If we weren't already part of the machine? Remember the machine versus the garden from Finite and Infinite Games? From Karsa's viewpoint, the machine represents the logic of mechanism. Tools and technologies that operate through predictable external forces, disciplining both the matter that makes up the machine and their operators into sequences of cause and effect. The two-way street there is important. Machines need operators. But as their operators engage with the machine, they inevitably become more machine-like because they are restricted to the finite capacities of the machine itself. You think I'm tripping? Just consider the next time someone actually says OMG out loud, or watches a concert through their iPhone screen for most of the night. The garden, by contrast, is the realm of growth and spontaneity, a living order that one inhabits rather than controls, where surprise is welcomed as essential to life. The machine is not merely a tool, but a worldview, reality conceived as a lifeless mechanism, as cause and effect sequences set into motion from outside. It's Cartesian philosophy, it's materialism, it's a completely static universe. When architecture is reduced to engineering, when ornament and function are split, when beauty is treated as subjective fancy, we are already operating as if the machine were the whole truth of the world. As operators of this viewpoint, we adapt our imagination to lifeless assumptions of mechanistic thought until we ourselves begin to move like cogs in the very system we invented. The garden, by contrast, is Alexander's living order. It is the recognition that the form can grow organically, that beauty and depth come from within, not from without. The gardener does not command the forest. She listens, adjusts, encourages. Gaia and her garden know that surprise is not an enemy, but the lifeblood of growth. In this way, Alexander's call to abandon the tacit assumptions of mechanism is the same as Karsa's call to live within the garden, to root the patterns of human culture in spontaneity rather than control, to design in harmony with the energies that arise from matter, from life, and from the world itself. Animism reminds us that the garden is the nature of reality. Matter and mind are not separate realms, but bound together like two notes within a single harmony. When we treat the world as a living being, and when we design as if the building will respond and interact with us as a living thing, when we act as if collectivism and individuality can grow together, we place ourselves in the garden. This is the infinite mystery, that as things become more unified, they also become more themselves. To build, to sing, to care in this way is to take up our role as gardeners of harmony, and to resist the lie that the machine is all there is. What Alexander is honing on in his cosmology, beyond his tacit assumptions, is the fusion of self and matter. That the self, the I, is very real, not just a meat suit, but the profound awareness of self. And it is of the same essence as what we call matter, and vice versa. But let me assure you that this is just one fundament of this metaphysics, this cosmology. Alexander is sure that the separation of ornament, beauty, or aliveness, or quality, all these words that capture the feeling of something and the function of something, is where we got ourselves into trouble. When the temple simply became a place to practice something sacred, as opposed to being sacred itself. In search for his cosmology, Alexander looks toward art and the artist, the creators of the world. He says, quote, "As a matter of observation, the most beautiful works of art throughout history, and many of the most profoundly living structures, have been created within a mystical religious context," end quote. He cites the adepts of Zen, the carpet weavers of the Sufis, the tantric paintings of India and Tibet, and of course, the churches of the Christian mystics. He is careful to say that this does not lead us back into religion itself. Instead, he looks at these works, ancient and modern alike, to understand what they have in common. What matters to him is the quality present in the making, and by studying how these artists worked and the conditions under which their creations came into being, Alexander tries to identify what is required for a structure to become alive. And it's not hard to imagine what he is surmising. If we build as a way of honing the divine, how can we not imbue it with this quality that he calls aliveness? If the Zen master lives the principle of Zen as he whittles the wood that will form the pillars of his temple, how can he not fill it with wholeness? For it is spirituality in its purest form, mind you, that teaches us to abandon the daily concerns of the ego and live from the pureness of spirit. And so to create from this place imbues the world with spirit. Now remember, according to Alexander, to build something alive means to build it in relation to the wholeness of the universe. To build it, essentially, in relationship to everything else. So what is it that we seek when we pray? When we live a life of devotion toward God? When we strip away ourselves to reach the divine? Do we not seek wholeness? Do we not seek to merge the self with the all? To build a structure with wholeness in mind is no different than building the vessel that is our soul through the practice of devotion. We are but a mere center in relation to all the other centers that make up the wholeness of all being.
For in every spiritual tradition is the tempering, the construction, the practice of creating a vessel to house the Spirit of God.
Through spiritual practice, we erect the temple of the soul within the human vessel. Hence, such a practice, though it benefits from study and education, from developing strict practices, cannot be planned with an inevitable outcome. It cannot be built from a blueprint, as each path toward wholeness of spirit is unique. In this way, to build something alive is a step-by-step process guided by discipline, but radically unpredictable in how the form will take place. Now it's here that we see what he means by saying that he seeks to find the I in his work, the eternal self, or the connection to the eternal, that which existed before the ego, and that which will exist after the ego. In this way, what is built is imbued with soul, but not just ambivalent soul, but the unique character of our soul. Is it becoming clear why this aliveness exists in the greatest buildings of human existence? Can you feel why the Alhambra, or the pyramids, or the great cathedrals of the Middle Ages, which still stand, have the qualities that they do? If humans just cease to exist in this moment, how long would a Home Depot box store remain? 100 years? Would it be recognizable in 200 years? Likely not, because it is lifeless. It was built without a shred of reverence. And remember, Alexander's not insisting religion is necessary in order to achieve aliveness in our built world. He's merely observed that those whom lived a religious life understand this aliveness. Alexander knows that aliveness existed before religion, that religion, when not politicized or weaponized, which sadly is mostly the case these days, can connect us to something more fundamental. It is this fundamental nature that Alexander is most interested in. In fact, he knows that this understanding is necessary to develop a cosmology that is far more relevant to the 21st century and is consistent with our current understanding of biology and physics. He desires a cosmology more relevant to the vision of our place in the universe. And this, he says, is the challenge of our era. For are we not, as we discussed before, still grappling with the woes of the Enlightenment, the abandonment of God in favor of the individual, as Nietzsche observed? Like many thinkers we've discussed, like my own intuition has often insisted, there is a new road that awaits us, a co-emergent property of the modern mind and the mind of yore. Sometimes I reference the indigenous mind, but in this case, Alexander points us towards the mind of the religious devotee. Either way, we're talking about the mind of a being who lives for and with spirit. a mind connected to the wholeness of the self that comes with the felt sense of the animism inherent in the universe. To this point, Alexander shares a story. There was an old man named Mr. Ishiguro, a master plasterer from Japan, 80 years old, with hands shaped by a lifetime of work. He was one of the last of his kind, someone who still practiced the ancient art of shikui, a traditional lime plaster mixed with natural ingredients and polished with trowels so fine they could turn a wall into something like a quiet pool of water. Alexander had the opportunity to work with Mr. Ishiguro on a project and found that he had truly met a master in the realm of aliveness. He came to the construction site where the team was working on the proposed project. Mr. Ishiguro brought his son, who was already 60 himself and had been plastering for 4 decades. Together they set up 2 small panels side by side and each began to work. The son, a skilled and practical man, finished first. His light green plaster looked smooth, professional, everything you'd expect. But the old man kept going. He worked slowly, carefully, almost reverently. His hand moved over the black plaster with the gentleness of someone touching the skin of a loved one. Not rushed, not even with a clear goal, just a deep presence and the tension that you can feel. When he was done, the black square gleamed. It was not merely polished, but deeply alive. It had the softness and a depth that just made you stop to admire. It didn't just reflect light, it seemed to hold it. It wasn't just a wall anymore, but an entire world of texture and feeling. Alexander noticed, of course, and was compelled to ask him what made his work so different from his son's. After all, his son had been plastering for 40 years. The old man said simply, "My son never understood this part. I tried to teach him, but I never could." He didn't say it with bitterness, but just a quiet resignation. That moment, what passed between the old man, the plaster, and the silence, was a glimpse of something our modern world barely remembers. A kind of relationship between a person and the material. Not about a technique or even a skill, but about presence, devotion, and the mystery that can emerge when we give ourselves completely to the making of a thing. This search for the divine within is also a search for relatedness. That is, how we relate to everything around us. Aho matakuyasin, the Lakota say. To all our relations. Blessings to that in you, which is also that in me, which is also that held within the mountain, or the raindrop, or the hummingbird. You know something is built with aliveness when you can relate to it in this way, when you can feel it in yourself. And it's this idea that drives home not only the aliveness of the built world, but the qualities that aliveness possesses, and how this reflects our internal state. So this relatedness to the thing around us, our ability to see ourselves in those things, our acknowledgement that these things have a quality of life, all point to a vast oneness and interwoven experience that is deeply personal and yet universal. What happens when we see a part of ourselves in everything? What happens when we see that everything is interwoven with us?
interwoven.
Everything is happening around me, and I am happening in everything. In following Alexander through his inquiries, we finally get to this place where Alexander himself has stumbled onto an object which lies outside the boundaries of space and time. Our relationship with the world itself as a living thing. Non-separateness between these centers he speaks of and the self. This is the I he keeps referring to. He is, of course, not referring to just this first-person idea, but more the idea that this metaphysics he is explaining is personal to everyone. That each of us is drawn to a universal relationship with the qualities of the self in all things, and that this relatedness is deeply intimate. To demonstrate this, Alexander would ask you to sit with something you've determined has a strong quality of life to it. A favorite object or chair, a family tree in the backyard, even your favorite spoon or knife. He would ask you to sit and look at the object, to feel it, and ask yourself, where do you end and the object begin? Can you feel yourself expanding toward the object and vice versa? Can you feel an attractive force? Where do you end? And where does it begin? Begin. He's not asking you to use your eyes. He's asking you to feel. To feel into its quality and your quality. To tune into the nature of it as one. Where do you end? If you are reminded of Buhner's meditations with the plants, then you too are beginning to pick up the golden threads that we are weaving in this podcast and our church mythology. What Alexander is inviting you into with this object is meditation. This subtle inquiry into boundary, attention, aliveness is meditation. It's uncannily similar to the inner limbs of yogic practice. Dharana, or concentration, and dhyana, meditative absorption. I don't know if his lens is entirely architectural or phenomenological, or if he's familiar with the yogic ways, but the mode of attention he's guiding you towards is nearly identical to what the yogic sages describe as the final steps before samadhi, or enlightenment. Where do you end? Dharana is the act of placing the mind, gently but unwaveringly, upon a single object. Not merely looking, but attending. In classical yoga, this might be the flame of a candle, the breath, or a sacred syllable. When you fix your attention there, not through effortful scrutiny, but through receptive coherence, you are practicing dharana.
You are placing your awareness on a field, not to dominate it, but to join it.
But then something happens. If you stay with that object, not thinking about it, just being with it, in presence, after a while you may notice the boundaries soften. The sense of you here and it there begin to blur. There's a movement from concentration to communion. This is dhyana, not just focused attention, but continuous awareness without separation. The yogic tradition describes this as a state where the object of meditation and the meditator are no longer distinct. And that is precisely what Alexander is pointing to when he asks, where do you end and the object begin? This isn't metaphorical. For Alexander, the boundary between self and world is a kind of illusion maintained by the mechanistic worldview we spoke of earlier. His theory of centers and living structures proposes that life is not located in the object alone, nor in the observer alone, but in the field of relationship between them.
That's the deep song.
This resonates directly with the Vedantic insight that what we experience as separate forms
are actually expressions of a singular living reality.
So when Alexander says, feel into an object's quality and your quality, and tune into the nature of it as one, he is, in effect, describing a practice of dhyana, absorption into the living nature of reality. Not transcendence upwards, but immanence inward. The feeling of life in a doorway or a spoon is not hallucinated. It is co-participated in. You are not observing the quality. You are entering it. In both Alexander's practice and the yogic path, there is a kind of epistemological humility. One doesn't know the object in the Cartesian sense. One becomes known through it by yielding to it.
Yield.
Let me say that again. One becomes known through it by yielding to it.
Yield.
In yoga, this leads towards samadhi, the dissolving of identity between the seer and the seen. In Alexander's view, these practices of merging with the object of meditation lead to the activation of the whole, a state where self and world unfold as one coherent structure.
A state where self and one unfold as one coherent structure.
This is the contemplative root of Alexander's architecture. Beyond form as function, but form as felt being. And that makes his entire project not just a design theory, but a spiritual practice in disguise. A spiritual school, if you will.
Go to school.
When one tunes to the nature of a thing as one is practicing yoga in its truest form. And so, what the yogis of old sought in the stillness of ashrams and forests, Alexander finds in chairs, in gardens, and thresholds. Not by accident, but because the quality that animates both is the same.
It's the same.
Now, where his meditation brought us into the realm of the Yoga Sutras, one of his chapters in Book 4, The 10,000 Beings, is an idea derived from the heart of Taoism. And yet, in choosing this name, he demonstrates clearly that he's familiar with these Taoist concepts, and he brings a deeper insight into the ancient practice and the precepts it offers.
Taoist master.
Now, most of you know I'm a fan of Taoism. So when I read The 10,000 Beings, I just fell deeper into this idea that Alexander is not just an architect, but a living master. He asks us to consider these centers we've referred to throughout this series as alive. Now he asks us to take it a step further. He asks us to consider them beings. I love that he introduces these ideas in stages, warming our minds to possibilities. Specifically, he says, quote, "A being is a small thing. It is a name for a center which is connected to the I. It is not a new kind of entity at all, merely another way of talking about living things as living centers. But unlike the phrase living center or living structure, the word being draws attention to the nearly animate quality that appears when something is connected to the I." End quote. By now, the fundamental spiritual framework of this series and the nature of the animate forces are coming into view. Can you see them? If a builder sees every part of a building, every stone or object, as having a kind of spirit or life or being, like many indigenous cultures believe, they will naturally create buildings that feel alive. They will naturally treat these buildings as if they were alive. The process of making things that feel like living beings, things that reflect the maker's own deep feelings and inner self, results in places that aren't just pleasant, but truly awesome. In his books, Alexander shows us again and again examples of this process in action. Even though he describes it through the lens of design methodology, he acknowledges that this deeper intention to create things that feel like beings was present throughout. And the process really works. When people build with care and honesty, trying to express their true selves through the process of creation, to touch the I within, and find its expression without, they end up creating structures that are both functional and full of life. What's surprising, he says, is that the most reliable way to make a living world is for people to follow their own inner feeling, what feels most true and wholesome to them. When people make things from their true self, the result is a world that works well for everyone. And so, the search for one's true self and the act of making a living world are deeply connected. They can't be separated. And this is where we begin to touch upon Alexander's view of individual expression. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, this is the part that really captivated me, because I've done quite a bit of ranting about individualism, narcissism, the veering away from the collective we've done culturally. But by the end of this episode, we may have a better understanding about how and why humans are developing such a strong sense of individuality in modern culture, and how it might be leading to our evolution. Yes, I just said that. Your desire to express your individuality is part of our evolution. I would love to debate Byung-Chul Han or Stephen Jenkinson about this, but Alexander has a point. And funny enough, this point came up in episode 2 many moons ago when we talked about the principles of coherence and co-emergence. Daniel Schmattenberger, in his talk at the Emergence Festival, said, quote, "Everyone knows that when you are in the experience of creating beauty that didn't exist before, in universe, that adds to universe, that is uniquely yours to create, you feel a kind of aliveness that is not matched by anything else." He then goes on to say, quote, "In a meaningful way, I am the evolutionary impulse of the universe awoke to itself in a form that has adequate ordered complexity to contemplate that and get to choose how to consciously participate in it. To not just be aboard Spaceship Earth, but crew. To help steer the direction of evolution and cosmos. So we move from evolution as mostly unconscious algorithmic processes that selects for dominance now to a process that could be mediated by conscious agents who can forecast a more beautiful future and select to help create that." End quote. In the act of building a living world, Alexander is describing something both simple and astonishing. When we make something truly alive, we ourselves are made more alive. It's not just that the object gains life, the maker is nourished as well. This effect is so deep that it's like food, sustaining us for days. People who build or shape something with wholeness often feel a glow, a calm, a happiness that lingers long after the act itself. And the opposite is true as well. When we make something ugly or dead, we feel dulled or depressed. This strange reciprocity between the life in things and the life in us is not a minor detail of artistic work. It's central. Alexander insists the phenomenon is empirical. Almost everyone who participates in true making experiences it. The act of creating wholeness enlarges us. It brings forward the most free and vivid version of who we are. In fact, he says that this process is healing. In architecture schools of the 1970s, Alexander's students dreaded the idea of working in offices where design was stripped of meaning and reduced to routine and capitalism. Against this background, the process of unfolding, of patiently generating living centers, was experienced as deeply fun and even joyful. And this joy was not trivial. It came because in the making of wholeness, the students felt themselves becoming whole. The act of making life in the world gave them life. I mean, can you imagine learning architecture from this guy? It's like Alan Watts and Frank Lloyd Wright had a baby or something. He tells a story of how this process is healing when he describes the experience of one particular student, Barbara Winslow. She kept a diary of her experience making centers, and she described how the act left her unusually peaceful and healthy, in a way she had not known before. Whenever she was able to bring life into something, she felt joy, clarity, lightness. When she could not, she felt listless and oppressed. The smallest living gesture, a window placed rightly, a plant aligned with a tree, could transform her whole inner state. The reason for this, he suggests, lies in the very nature of wholeness. Just as the intensity of one center depends on the centers around it, so our own wholeness depends on the wholeness of what surrounds us. Thus, whenever we succeed in creating life in this world, we strengthen our own wholeness. The relation is direct and structural. Wholeness out there creates wholeness in here. This is why Alexander advises students not to ask, is it good? But instead, does it make me more whole inside? If the answer is yes, then the thing has life. If not, it must be remade. The ultimate test of living structure is not external judgment, but deep resonance. A resonance that awakens in the self. Patterns, such as what he calls the alcove described in a pattern language, is helpful because these patterns give us permission to feel. They draw attention to aspects of life we may already know but are cut off from. For example, by naming the alcove, Alexander gives legitimacy to intimate spaces at a time when modern architecture forbade them. More importantly, he allowed people to notice how such spaces awakened subtle feelings of intimacy, and how their absence left rooms barren. Patterns, in this sense, don't implant new values, but unlock awarenesses of what is already inside of us, hidden. Imagine if every office building had an alcove designed specifically for workers to have an intimate conversation in a nourishing space. It sounds ridiculous, yet at the same time, absurd that this is not the case. Culture is an important word. So is pattern. Arguably, there's no difference between the two. Culture is a set of patterns of behavior by a particular group of humans that distinguish them from other humans. A collective individualism, if you will. I'll probably end up doing a whole episode on this, to be honest, but for now, just feel into this idea that our sense of belonging is linked to our culture, to our pattern language. That culture and the patterns that make it up are intrinsic to our health and our well-being. The recognition of living structure, the liberation of feeling, it strengthens self-knowledge. One becomes aware of vulnerability, of connection to the world, of the deeper self that is linked to the grass, sky, and stone. And as this awareness grows, the person comes closer to the luminous ground, the great I, the underlying reality that gives all things life. Alexander is careful to stress that this cannot be done by expressing oneself in shallow ways. True aliveness in what we make arises only when we bring forward our deepest humanness, our most childlike and vulnerable self. And paradoxically, this requires knowledge of structure, the abstract geometry of the field of centers. It is only by grasping that impersonal order that we can place our most personal selves into the world. In this way, the living field of centers is both a mirror of the human heart and the key that unlocks it. What this means is that the making of wholeness is not just an aesthetic or technical task, but a profound human one. It carries sadness, joy, vulnerability, our most ordinary humanity into form. It binds us to the whole. Alexander notes that some people report feeling closer to God in the presence of a living structure, even those without religious beliefs. Now, whether or not one calls it God, what they experience is more of a vastness of this sacred ground, this deep coherence of the I. Each time life is created in the world, it nourishes us directly, enlarges the self, and strengthens our connection to everything. This is why the act of making beauty matters so much. It is why Alexander says beauty is the highest order of spiritual nourishment. It sustains not just the artifact, not just the viewer, but the maker and all who come near it. And it suggests the possibility of a society where individuals, feelings, and the shape of the world are woven into a continuous whole, where making life in the environment and becoming alive within ourselves are one and the same process. Alexander's closing movement of this series begins with a radical claim that sounds almost naive until its depth is revealed. To create a living structure, you must please yourself, not in the shallow sense of indulging whims or chasing comfort, but in the deepest sense, listening to that quiet childlike self within, the part of you that knows harmony, that recognizes rightness, that feels when something touches the eternal. He insists that each of us carries a best self, a deep reservoir of goodness and order, and that it is this self we appeal to when we ask, which of these two things is more like the feeling of me? Living structure can be identified by nothing more and nothing less than whether it resonates with this inner ground. To make a thing alive, we must discover that true self and learn to please it. And though this sounds easy, it's almost unbearably difficult, because it requires stripping away every layer of pretense, every force that pushes us toward conformity or superficiality or comfort, until only the most unguarded self remains. From this perspective, the 4 volumes of The Nature of Order converge into a single thread. Book 1 showed us that what pleases us deeply is always what carries life, though we have become estranged from that instinct. Book 2 revealed that the step-by-step unfolding processes arise naturally from the act of bringing joy to oneself, truly. Book 3, with its many examples of living buildings and places, was really a vision of what the world becomes when men and women have the freedom and courage to create from a sense of joy. And Book 4, even in its most spiritual assertions about the I and the ground of being, comes down again to the same truth. When we are free enough to please ourselves truly, we enter into the sacred, the profound, the most spiritual art. This might sound irreverent to spiritual traditionalists, but Alexander argues it is not heresy at all. What the great religious traditions once taught, union with God, the making of holy things, was in fact this very practice of pure freedom, doing only what arises from the heart, only what truly brings joy. To please oneself in this sense is to reach the same ground sought by the mystics, to touch forms most like nature, most aligned with the universe itself. He illustrates this with a story from his teaching life. Students often hid their most vulnerable work, embarrassed to show what felt too simple, too raw, too unlike the sophisticated efforts of their peers. But again and again, when coaxed into revealing these shy pieces, they turned out to be the most alive. He recalls Veronica's sketch of a blue chair against a yellow ground. So plain she nearly laughed it away, so close to the bone she could barely show it. Yet when it was revealed, it carried a heart-stopping quality, evoking the essence of childhood, memory, and being itself. It was this vulnerability, this unpretentiousness, that gave it life. The lesson is that what truly pleases us is often hidden, overlooked, or dismissed as insignificant. It is veiled because it comes from the most personal, most unguarded part of ourselves, the parts we are trained to suppress. Yet it is only by drawing from this vulnerable core that living structure can emerge. And here lies the paradox. To bring this level of pleasure to yourself is hard. Society does not encourage it. We are trained instead to follow rules, to obey prescriptions, to pursue external approval, but to please only oneself truly. To make each thing so that it genuinely gives pleasure requires contact with the eternal self, what Zen calls no mind, what the Sufis call being drunk in God. It's not trivial at all, but a doorway to the ground of existence. This, Alexander says, is the astonishing and humbling truth. If we each did only what we truly loved, if we made things that really pleased us, living structure would arise everywhere. The ugly dead buildings that scar the world could not be made, because they give no one genuine pleasure. The simple rule contains the whole of the nature of order. To create life, do what you like, but do it honestly, with no masks, no pretense. It sounds absurd, even false, until you realize how rarely we actually do this, how rarely we listen to the quiet self within, the child waiting in us all along. And yet, if we did, if we found the courage to please ourselves truly, then the world around us would be transformed, and with it, our own lives. I'm personally reminded of how often I would build things with the things that were available to me. Sticks, stones, toothpicks, napkins. I would constantly be making simple designs that pleased me. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with trains. I think I talked about this before, but the shape of a diesel train engine car, such a simple design, I would recreate it constantly out of anything because it pleased me. Take a moment to ask yourself how often you've engaged in such acts. Maybe not building, but drawing, knitting, singing, weaving patterns into moments of art that pleased you. At West Dean, one of his design projects, Alexander describes the immense effort it took to bring the visitor's center into a state that truly pleased him. He began with sketches, then moved to full construction experiments with poured concrete and herringbone brick panels, testing again and again how to balance size, rhythm, color, and geometry so that the wall felt alive. Every detail mattered. The thistle-shaped brick forms above the windows, the thickness of the grout lines, the proportion of brick to concrete, the rise of arches. With as little as a quarter-inch adjustment in overhangs, always asking, does this version please me more or less? This work was not about sweetness or decoration, but about severity, stark geometry, and the disciplined arrangement of centers. Only through that precision and toughness did the wall come alive, producing not only visual strength, but a subtle atmosphere in which people could feel at ease. Inside as well, the same patient, repeated refinements gave shape to spaces where people could sit comfortably and peacefully. What looked simple in the finished form was the product of an extraordinary patience. Trial after trial until the geometry resonated, until it truly pleased. Now it occurs to me that this is a luxury. Having built my own modest house, limited by time and money, my aliveness came with having to go back and change a great many things, specifically the location of light fixtures and outlets, because of the eventual changes in the layout that helped bring life to the place. In other words, my trial and error was not experimental. It was in real time and meant going back over my work. But that's what it took. And that's Alexander's point. To create something alive requires a relentless care, a willingness to make hundreds of small, almost invisible decisions, each one moving toward what pleases more. Only through that slow, difficult effort can a building embody life. turns out, the things that carry life, that stop the heart, come from the most ordinary, most vulnerable parts of ourselves. They are personal, almost embarrassingly so. And because of that, they carry an innocence and purity that cannot be faked. When he finds himself stuck in making a building, unsure which path to take, he resolves the impasse by asking, which choice would I really like if I were doing it only for myself? Despite the fact we've been told that wholeness is achieved by egolessness, how could it be that by pleasing ourselves we arrive at it? And yet he insists that this paradox is the key. Only by touching our deepest self do we touch the nature of order. The test is always, does it make me feel more whole? If it does, then it carries life. But reaching this childlike level of awareness is difficult.
Society will discourage you.
But we ourselves resist it with layers of professionalism, self-consciousness. Paradoxically, only this sense of order, this awareness of the field of centers, frees us enough to return to that childlike seeing, the way a 3-year-old places color on paper simply because it feels right. In that freedom, what pleases us and what is objectively true becomes one and the same. This is the revolution, that the most personal and tender part of ourselves is also the most objective. The field of centers, the great structure of the universe, is not just out there, abstract and impersonal. It is mirrored in our own hearts. When we put our humanness, our childlike vulnerability, into what we make, the work becomes whole because the field of centers is itself a reflection of our humanity. Perhaps in this sense, moving from your inner joy is not indulgence, but transcendence. It's what St. Francis meant when he sought only to please God. To act from the deepest part of oneself is to act in alignment with the divine. Acting from inner joy, truly, beyond rules, beyond shame, creates wholeness in the world. And in doing so, draws you closer to the luminous ground. And what happens when we are drawn closer to the luminous ground? Suddenly, wholeness appears in the world. Centers lock into harmony. A thing breathes life. We create beauty and order together. It is God, not the symbol of God, not a veil pointing elsewhere, but spirit itself made manifest in wood, brick, plaster, paint. The lazy hum of the bees, the summer wind, the light on the leaves. When these are caught in form, they are not like God. They are God. A wall, a window, a chair, a scrap of paint can become a direct embodiment of the divine if they are made in that state where wholeness is preserved. Then matter itself begins to shine. The dull stuff of wood, stone, concrete becomes spirit. The responsibility this places on the maker is immense. To create centers is to bring spirit into the world. That is why Alexander insists on working with a certain state of mind. Every line, every joint, every corner must be approached as if it were a gift to God. Not to glorify oneself, not to win praise, but to serve something greater. When the carpenter working with him tried to make a detail too noticeable, too proud, Alexander pared it back again and again and again until it disappeared into quiet rightness. Only then, when it no longer shouted, "Look at me," could he offer it as a gift. This humility becomes the architect of consciousness. It is necessary. Without it, the thing loses life. Our natural tendency is to stand out, to be separate, to make things that point back to us. But in life, things come only when the desire to be separate dissolves, when the work merges with its surroundings, when it stops clamoring for attention. The greatest works in history carry this humility, because this religious discipline trains people, quite practically, to let go of the self. To stand before them is to feel that nothing is separate, that everything is connected, and that all is well. This is Alexander's not separateness, that pattern language, that deep condition which a thing is so unified with the world that it becomes inseparable from it, and therefore radiates with extraordinary power. It's a big surprise. Individualism, collectivism, it's paradoxical. The less a thing asserts itself, the more deeply it belongs to the world, the more individual and precious it becomes. To reach this, the maker must abandon pride, abandon the urge to be recognized, and seek only to let the deep feeling shine forth. Each choice in the making, the 10,000 choices, must be guided by the question, which one is the truest gift? Which one can I offer with a clear heart? And so we come to the great reversal, the most personal, most vulnerable act of truly expressing our own inner creativity and joy, and the most objective, most cosmic truth of order are one and the same. To touch that childlike heart within is to touch the ground of being itself. When a building, a painting, a chair achieves this, it does not merely remind us of God. It becomes the face of God before our eyes. This is a deep thread in the Church of Infinite Harmony. What he calls God made manifest in wood and stone, we in the Church recognize as the animist truth that spirit is not behind things, but within them. The life of centers is not abstract. It is the same aliveness we name when we say the river is alive, the mountain is alive, the stone carries presence, the wind carries voice. This aliveness is the unveiling of Gaia herself, the world shimmering with coherence, every part bound to every other, no separateness. When we say that a thing is alive, we mean what he means, that the spirit of the universe, the face of God, shows itself in form. This is why our practice begins not with doctrine, but with presence, to make something, to plant, to build, to sing. These acts are offerings. They are gifts to the living world, to Pachamama, to Viracocha, to the great I. And when we do them in humility, without shouting to the rooftops for ourselves, they come alive. Alexander's paradox is our inheritance, that the more personal and childlike we become, the more we create ourselves in innocence, the more universal and sacred the result. In that sense, our creative acts are not selfish but devotional. It is the way we participate in harmony. It is the animist sacrament. Each being, each act of making, reveals itself as spirit in form. And so the work of the Church is not to build temples apart from the world, but to see every field, every river, every humble wall as a temple already. To learn, again, the discipline of pleasing ourselves truly, so that what pleases us is what pleases the earth, what pleases the cosmos, what pleases the divine. So a quick refresher. How the hell did we get here? This mechanistic world void of wholeness. And how do we get back? Well, there's a deeper thread here yet to understand. For centuries, we have lived under the shadow of Descartes' partition. The world split into res extensa, the extended stuff of matter, and res cogitans, the flickering soul of thought. It was a bargain struck in the 17th century to allow science its freedom. Matter would be stripped of meaning, of value, and spirit. It would be seen as inert, mute, and measurable. In return, thought would be left to theology, philosophy, the interior. The world could be then dissected like a cadaver, and from this dissection came the triumphs of industry, medicine, and mechanics, but also, inevitably, the silencing of spirit. That silence still haunts us. It is the silence of a world without a voice, a tree reduced to biomass, a river to hydroelectric potential, a child to a consumer profile. And even as physics unraveled its old certainties, even as the quantum revolution upended the clean gears of Newton's cosmos, the silence remained. Quantum mechanics, for all its mathematical strangeness, still speaks in a language of probability distributions and wave functions, not a living presence. It describes a shimmering blur of potentiality collapsing into actuality, but it does not tell us what the world is. Alexander enters this gap. He observes what most scientists will not say aloud, that the reigning view of matter as fundamentally dead is not only counterintuitive, it's just plain false. But it's false because it cannot explain the life we see. It cannot account for the way the Taj Mahal moves us, or the way a stone doorway holds us, or the way an old woman's face carries the world's tenderness in its lines. Physics has no category for these things, and yet they are among the most real experiences we have. So how do we get back? We acknowledge that wholeness is real. It's not an impression, not a projection of the mind, but a fundamental feature of the universe. It's not mystical fog, it's structural. It can be detected, measured, intensified. It shows itself as nodes of coherence, levels of order nestled within order, like ripples upon ripples. Centers. If we attend to these centers, we feel more alive. And we don't treat that feeling as arbitrary, we treat it as diagnostic. It tells us about the world's structure, not just our subjectivity.
Okay, but I did not expect an architecture episode to go that hard. I thought it was gonna be all angles and concrete and whatever.
Oh my god,
and instead it was basically, why does your soul feel dead in a strip mall?
Girl.
Which, honestly, valid. Some places just feel alive, and now I can't unfeel it. And when he said life isn't just plants and puppies, but patterns, I almost choked. Because is that the reason some neighborhoods feel cozy and others feel like corporate parking lot apocalypses?
Totally.
Not random. I guess it's just how things fit together. I mean, it's kind of genius, but also kind of obvious once you hear it. Right? And the whole you don't design life, you grow thing, I was okay, Gardner energy, I see you. But it makes sense. Instead of some architect swooping in behold my masterpiece, it's more like tiny decisions, one at a time.
Exactly.
Each making the whole place stronger. Adding layers to an outfit. You don't just throw it all on at once. You build it.
Please, always.
And about the strong centers, at first I was like, is this geometry class? But then I got it. Every place needs a focal point, something that pulls you in, like a courtyard or a staircase or a cafe corner. And the bigger spaces need to support the smaller ones. It's like friend groups. You totally need friend groups. You need a group chat. But you also need your one-on-one tea, Stop it. That's totally literally it. And I loved when they talked about the imperfect beauty.
Not the shiny all-glass influencer-ready buildings, but the slightly worn ones. The kind where, like, the paint's a little chipped and the doorway's kind of uneven, but it totally
like
feels real. Like that Japanese rusty beauty thing.
Yeah,
obsessed. Life isn't polished, it's lived in. And, you know, like, the cities are built, like, by millions of tiny acts instead of one big genius plan. That's so hopeful. It's not some dramatic montage. It's just people caring and fixing things and sharing benches and planting something. Strengthening what already feels good.
Oh my god, exactly. It's not like we need a futuristic megastructure.
No.
It's, does this make the whole better? That's the vibe.
Like everything.
And apparently if enough people do that, you can see that it actually feels human instead of like a tech demo.
That's what I'm saying.
Also, like, why am I suddenly judging my apartment layout like it's a personality flaw?
Oh, girl, me too. 100%.
Like, do I have strong centers? I don't know.
Girl, you're like Shaquille O'Neal's center. Don't worry about it.
Is my couch aligned with my destiny?
Well, your couch is kind of sad.
I can't believe an architecture episode made me spiral in the best way.
Oh my god, me too.
We agree that beneath equations there is something like a mind, something like spirit, something like value running through matter itself. Alexander says this openly, and he doesn't mean it poetically, he means it concretely. That fields of centers behave as if they were a substance. They have laws, thresholds, degrees. These thresholds increase or decrease depending on how we act upon them. A wall painted yellow in the right place intensifies it. A strip mall weakens it. We're left with a choice here. Either we continue to pretend, like the heirs of Descartes, that matter is indifferent and dead, and that life and spirit are accidents floating upon it, or we take the braver path to say that matter itself is alive, value-laden, soul-like in its very bones. The Church of Infinite Harmony has chosen the second, again and again. We did it through Stephen Herod Buhner, through Gaia. We do it again with Alexander. Because if wholeness is real, then our feelings are not these private ghosts. They are instruments akin to senses, tuned to detect the wholeness. They tell us what is alive, what is whole, what participates in the unfolding of cosmos. This is why Alexander insists that our full creative expression, in its childlike way, is not egotism, but precision. It is the calibration of the heart to the actual structure of the world. So quantum mechanics becomes this halfway house, brilliant, mysterious, but incomplete. Yes, it reveals a cosmos not of rigid gears, but of fluid potential. But it does not say that the shimmering probabilities are expressions of a deeper coherence, a great self, the eye that looks out from every center, that the observer matters in a spiritual sense. Alexander dares to say it. We dare to say it. And that daring is the first step toward a metaphysics in which science, art, and animism no longer stand apart, but become aspects of one thing: the nature of order. The end is nigh, my friends, the end is nigh. We have sketched a great cosmology before us, one that reaches into physics, into the way matter and mind are bound, and into the strange new shape of reality itself. The mechanistic picture has already been broken apart by the 20th century. Pauli, Schrödinger, Bohm, Wald, all of them saw that the old dead image of matter could not account for the phenomena uncovered by quantum mechanics. What was once thought of as a clockwork machine had dissolved into a haze of probability, non-local connection, and fields that cannot be pinned down as particles or waves. In this collapse, an old idea reemerges: that consciousness, the very ground of self, is not an after effect, but a substrate, a condition of the world itself. The Upanishads have said it for thousands of years, that mind is woven into matter, that self is not epiphenomenon, but the deepest stratum of the real. What we're attempting to do is suggest a modification to physics, one where the geometry of centers, the recursive unfolding of wholeness, becomes a principle as primary as force or mass, what we call value, what Robert Pirsig called quality, what Alexander called aliveness. The degree to which something is alive enters physics as a measurable feature of space. The life of a column, the wholeness of a leaf, the coherence of a neighborhood. These are not accidents of human fancy, but signatures of the same field-like order that holds atoms together. Matter is alive because the structure of space is alive. Time itself bends under this view. No longer a reversible parameter, time is revealed as asymmetric, directional, like the growth of a fern or the branching of a river. The world unfolds rather than simply ticking forward. And this unfolding, this value is not an ornament but a law. What is more whole tends to preserve itself, to deepen, to recur. The order of the world is inseparable from the feeling it awakens. We have to allow the personal and the impersonal, the subjective and the objective to collapse into one another. The act of making art, or even simply of perceiving beauty, is an opening between the ordinary surface of things and the deeper ground from which they come. The work of the artist is to make the connection to that ground feelable, embodied, inhabitable. When it succeeds, we are not only pleased but healed. The world and the self momentarily touch, and the gap between them dissolves. What is most extraordinary and most subversive is that as the picture becomes more objective, more scientific, it also becomes more personal. The closer we come to the unified ground of space and matter, the more we discover that it carries the texture of feeling, that it is touched by our own humanness. We are bathed in the recognition that the world and the self are not two. In physics, this shows as entanglement. In mathematics, as recursion. In architecture, as a room that makes you feel at ease. It is the same truth at every scale. Not surprisingly, the universe, in its most rigorous description, begins to resemble the oldest myths. A cosmos alive with centers. A ground of being that is both impersonal order and personal presence. The animists knew this in the stone and the river. St. Francis danced barefoot to praise it. The Upanishadic sages spoke of it as the self. The Church of Infinite Harmony says the universe is coherent, self-organizing, sanctified. Alexander says the universe is a field of centers, recursive, whole, alive. We say presence is the gate to mystery. He says to create with pure joy, in childlike innocence, is to touch the I at the heart of it all. The language differs, but the song is one. Which brings us to the new assumptions, which we must orient ourselves to if we are to break the old paradigm once and for all. First, space is not empty. It is not a neutral backdrop against which things happen. It is structured, filled with latent order, alive with gradients, symmetries, resonances. What we think of as objects are simply focal points, concentrations of this larger continuum. Second, time has directionality. It carries the arrow of unfolding, like the growth of a plant or the rippling spread of a wave. Within this unfolding, novelty emerges, patterns deepen, coherence consolidates. The universe is not static machinery, but an organism in motion. Third, quality is woven into the structure of the world. A line that feels alive, a room that feels whole, a grove that draws our breath. These are not private hallucinations, but accurate comprehensions of the deeper order. The degree to which something pleases or feels whole is not idiosyncratic. It reveals alignment with the generative geometry of reality. Fourth, the personal and the impersonal are not separate domains. The closer one comes to the ground of things, the more they converge. The subjective sensation of beauty is the mirror of objective coherence. The human act of creation, from the place of innocence, turns out to be the most reliable compass for building, painting, and dwelling, and living. The humanness we bring is not an intrusion upon the world's order, but the very means by which we participate in it. I'll say that one again. The humanness we bring is not an intrusion upon the world's order, but the very means by which we participate in it. This is the beginning of a new cosmology, a new physics, not yet fully formalized perhaps, but already glimpsed in quantum mechanics, already whispered by Bohm's implicate order, already implied by the paradoxes of entanglement and the non-locality of mind. The universe is not mute. It speaks in patterns of coherence. It intensifies life. And when we learn to hear it, we find that it is deeply personal. I hope this leaves you with a deeper understanding of the aliveness of our planet and the coherence of this amazing creation and our place in it. Animism, in its essence, is the refusal to bifurcate. It does not accept that there are mere things on one side and real beings on the other. Everything participates in the field. The Andean farmer making offerings to Pachamama is not indulging in quaint custom. He is aligning with the structure-preserving transformations of the land. The Yoruba priest who calls down the Orisha is not fabricating. She is tuning herself to the coherence of the field of centers we call spirit. The physicist mapping a quantum field, the architect shaping a plaza, the child scribbling color on a page, are all, in truth, practicing the same art. They are acknowledging the world's aliveness and trying, with greater or lesser humility, to cooperate with it. And so must we, every day, cooperate with everything around us. Allow ourselves to feel into the wholeness of each environment, whether the home, the office, the cafe, the nuclear family. Once again, all of eternity comes down to the quaint wisdom of Harry Tuttle.
We're all in it together, kid.
The Church of Infinite Harmony is not inventing a new religion, but remembering an old one. We are restoring what Alexander uncovered with geometry, what shamans preserved in ritual, what saints embodied in poverty, and what poets have sung in every age, that the world and the self are not two, that the ground of being is not neutral, but alive, that the act of creating your life, if done in innocence, is the act of aligning with the cosmos, aligning toward awe and responsibility. So may we be burdened with awe. For if the universe is alive, then every act of creation or destruction touches upon its flesh. To design a building badly is not just to offend taste, it is to wound the field of centers. To clear-cut a forest is not just to rearrange biomass, it is to extinguish a presence, to erase a coherence that cannot be remade ever again. To pollute a river is not just to alter chemistry, it is to desecrate a spirit. This awe cuts two ways. It consoles us, for we are not exiles in a dead void, but children in a living body. And it convicts us, for the damage we do is not abstract, but intimate, personal, carved into the same ground that sustains our own being. The crisis of our civilization, its alienation, its ugliness, its ecological ruin, stem from forgetting this. From thinking that we could live in neutral space, build without heart, act without resonance. The result is emptiness, sterility, and collapse. Responsibility is the inevitable consequence of seeing clearly. Once you know the field is alive, you cannot act as though it were not. To make is to consecrate. To destroy is to desecrate. This is the true weight of the animist revolution. It does not allow us to remain neutral. It forces us to recognize that the order of the world and the order of our hearts are one, and that every choice we make either strengthens or weakens the coherence that holds us all. But fear not, my children of harmony, there is hope. For the means to restore is not hidden, not arcane. It is childlike. It begins by doing what brings pleasure into your environment. It begins by listening to what truly feels whole and having the courage to follow it, even when convention sneers. If we can recover that innocence in art, in building, in politics, in daily life, then the field of centers will begin to heal itself through us. The coherence of Gaia will not be a theory, but a felt reality, embodied in farms and houses, in rivers and rituals. This is what it means to walk in harmony. We are not inventing utopia or escaping into abstraction, but rejoining the living fabric with every act. To build as though building were prayer. To speak as though words were medicine. To walk as though the ground were holy. To know that the smallest gesture, the way we place a window, the way we share a meal, the way we offer water to the spirits, can either deepen the world's wholeness or tear it apart. In a strange way, the Church of Infinite Harmony is my gift of creation, born of innocence, to all of us. And I'm grateful to say that almost instantly it ceased to be my creation and became part of the whole. It became ours. It was created by many. May we teach ourselves again and again how to create from innocence and aliveness. Perhaps, if we succeed, we will leave behind not only monuments, not only empires, but something greater, a living world. A world whose buildings breathe, whose rivers sing, whose people walk in innocence, whose coherence reflects the very heart of the cosmos. A world that pleases itself, and so pleases God. The personal and the impersonal, the intimate and the cosmic. They are not two. They are one act, one fabric, woven of a great many golden threads. And that fabric, that woven universe, whenever we touch it, makes the world alive. Well, all Alrighty then. That wraps up our 5-hour synopsis on The Nature of Order by Scott Alexander. What a ride. Thank you for coming along. This was definitely one of the deepest dives into a particular body of work that I've done, at least in this podcast. Much appreciated. Still working on a new forum, still trying to figure out what to do now that our website company has disabled our forum and all forums. I was considering Patreon, even though I said I wouldn't, also to make donations easier. However, they don't really have a great forum either, so I'm not sure what to do. Feel free to give me some feedback or some ideas. info@infiniteharmony.org is a great way to reach us. Today's episode, of course, intro, outro, thanks to Azira and Coyote, the fine musicians out there making amazing music. Both can be found on Spotify. Links in the show notes. Today's episode included a lot of music from a lot of different places, mostly from Pirsig Free Sounds, a website that offers royalty-free music. A lot of the background music is either a combination of sampled sounds found on the interwebs or sounds made by yours truly in the studio with the various synth equipment available. Today's episode also featured Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra, quotes from The Nature of Order Part 4, The Luminous Ground, quotes from James Carse's Finite and Infinite Games, quotes by Daniel Schmattenberger during his talk at the Emergence Festival, quotes from A Pattern Language by Scott Alexander. Please remember to visit our website, infiniteharmony.org. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider becoming a monthly member. Please donate to the Church of Infinite Harmony. It supports us in many ways. If you would like to see what we do in our totality, please visit our website. There's lots of stuff and information about our church. And yes, we are a church. That means we can marry you. We can bury you. We do desire to touch our community with our work and offer our services. All right, my friends, until next time. Peace.